Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll be talking about how you can win in a hybrid work world. We'll share some considerations for IT leaders to get you there. I'm Sasha Chilkova, Marketing Manager here at Withum. I'll take care of a couple of housekeeping items and then we can get going. We are recording this webinar. We'll share a link to the recording and the slide deck later this afternoon. We'll actually make this session a little bit shorter, so it'll probably end up being about a half an hour. We'll leave plenty of time for questions. Please don't hold back. You can send in the questions during the session in the questions panel of the control panel. And then if we don't get to your questions, we're happy to answer them by email. And with that, with me today, I have Chris and Max joining us. And if you guys want to introduce yourselves, go for it.
Thank you, Sasha. So my name is Chris Ertz. I'm the practice leader here for the Withum Cloud practice. And so my job is to make sure that our clients are getting the fastest time to value of their Microsoft Cloud investments. I work with great people like Max to help serve our clients. Been with Withum for 2 years. I'm based out of the Bethesda office. Most of my career I spent in the field with Microsoft. So my fun fact is I started at the Windows 95 launch and did launch events all the way till 2016 when they stopped doing launch events. The cloud came around and now we don't do launches. We just continue to iterate and provide new services and experiences. Hello, Max.
Hey, Chris. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, good morning, good afternoon. So I'm Max Herve. I'm a lead consultant at Withum. I've been with the company for the last 7 years, but I started my career more on the networking and infrastructure side of things. Microsoft Cloud came out after that, and since then I've been working on cloud deployments, hybrid deployments. So yeah, really helping customers use applications in the cloud in a secure fashion. So yeah, looking forward to discussing some of the hybrid challenges with you guys.
Awesome, thanks, Max. And today we will talk about, Chris will start off to define the hybrid workplace challenges and capabilities that we're seeing today. And then Max will, take over and address, are your employees securely able to access their work from home? How do you efficiently onboard and offboard employees? We get a lot of questions about that one. What's your strategy to prevent data leakage onto personal computers? And then how do you prevent sensitive data from getting leaked out of your organization?
We're going to start with some polls.
Yes, please. We do want to learn a little bit about our audience, and it'll help us gear the conversation a little bit more. So we have 3 polls for you. If you could participate, we'd appreciate it. So the first one is, what percentage range of your staff is working remote? Just a guesstimate is good. Let's see. Participate, probably the majority. Let's see, as we have answers coming in. Okay, it looks like, as we guessed, about almost 60% are 76 to 100% remote. So that's typically what we're seeing, and then only 11% are 0 to 25. So pretty heavy remote workforce. For the second poll, we'd like to know if you have a process in place for when somebody leaves the organization. Let's see, majority, we hope, is a yes, but we have, give it a few more seconds. I also gave the option of sort of, just to see. And so it's actually split evenly between yes and sort of. So no. Okay. And then the last poll for the moment is, where do you stand on your information protection strategy? And you can select more than one answer here. Let's see. Hopefully it's working. Yes, okay. Looks like, let's give it a few more seconds. Wow, it's very evenly split. It looks like at least one is captured here, but I would say it's even across all the stages. The most being data loss prevention policies are in place. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for letting us know, and we can get started.
Well, it sounds like everyone is in the midst of hybrid work, which is what we anticipated. And it's not new. What's changing is the scale of hybrid work. We're now in year 2 of the pandemic. We are seeing that it's not going to change. But things have been this way for a while. We've been able to connect to remote work through things like VPN connections, but those are older technologies and performance suffers. We don't have access to all the tools that we need, and there's some infrastructure to implement them. So hopefully you've transitioned beyond that, and that's one of the areas that we've been spending a lot of time with clients. The theme of this webcast, supporting hybrid work. There are some business challenges that goes along with hybrid work. It's here to stay. So as I mentioned, we're now year 2. There's no rush back to the office. I am here in the Bethesda office, and I'll show you. It's empty. There's a printer, which I never use, and a whole row of cubes, empty. So I usually go into one of the break rooms for a webinar, and today I'm on speakerphone, and everyone can hear me if they were here, but no one's here. I'm fortunate that I live in DC, and this is Bethesda, and it's a couple of miles away from my home, but that's not always the case. But yeah, do people want an office? Yeah, it's nice to have a headquarter office. Most people still want to have a hybrid approach. If we need to actually conduct meetings and with a team, it's nice to be able to go in. People are working from home, are more productive, but they're exhausted. I just put something on my calendar this week today with the Viva connections, or the Viva Insights, which takes a pulse of your calendar and says, hey, you're way too busy. So I noticed that people are starting to put noon calendar appointments on my calendar. So I now have a break for lunch on my calendar next week. I'll see how that goes and see if I can capture that lunch. It's important to have that balance working from home. People feel like they're siloed into teams, they're disconnected, and innovation suffers without in-person contact. Like I mentioned, I've been here for a couple of years. Thankfully, I had 6 months where I had a chance to get to know the team before we all started working from home. Max always works from home. So Max and I speak almost every day, and I've shook his hand twice. We've met twice in 2 years. So it's nice to see Josh. We had a meeting this week in New Jersey at our headquarters. And so it's great to have the in-person contact, but you know, people are working pretty well from home, and they want to continue that. While they're working from home, they want seamless, easy connection to important resources. They still want to collaborate with their colleagues and their clients. They are using one device, and they want all the tools to be on that device. But sometimes on that device, they mix in their personal lives. They're maintaining school schedules for the kids, weekend activities and plans, travel. So they tend to do that on their work devices because it's always on, they're always working. So to create a hybrid work environment, now that we set the stage, here are some of our recommendations. I've been helping a lot of clients understand and define requirements using personas. When I mention personas, I'm thinking about the different types of workers that are in your environment. Do you have remote staff? How about frontline workers if you're in retail or distribution or manufacturing? Is there a headquarter office where people come in every day? What's their experience? Do we have temporary staff, interns, contractors? So if we define those personas, then allows us to deliver the appropriate cloud services. We also have to consider if you have specialized tools that may not be cloud-based. So how do we architect those to be still supported by remote staff? So we're doing a lot of lift and shift to Azure of infrastructure or on-premise based applications that weren't designed for the cloud or are not available as SaaS. We've got most of our productivity tools, but still there may be application specialized tools that are not cloud-based there. So once they're there in the cloud, how do we secure them and give them applications and appropriate devices? And then now that they're working on these devices, how do I simplify that access, keep it consistent, and keep the data secure? Those are all questions we're, in our short time together, going to answer. One of my approaches is to take a policy-driven configuration approach based upon those personas. And so we have these identity-driven personas with Microsoft 365, which allows us to create role-based access for consistent experiences across multiple devices in the office or remote. So if you haven't created policies for personas, what's holding you back? Well, one of the drivers we're seeing is the industry requirements. So if you're a regulated industry, healthcare, government, financial services, there are many industry regulations that are always changing, and the cloud has done a nice job of adapting and understanding how to implement those requirements. The other category we've seen in the last 6 months more and more is the cyber insurance organizations are defining how you need to share and protect data, especially if you're working on a contract with sensitive information. They will dictate that that data must be in an encrypted cloud storage and can only be accessed using multi-factor authentication. Those are all good best practices, but we're finding that those organizations are dictating on some of our project work for clients. So with Microsoft 365, you have those choices of setting up a very detailed, granular approach to those personas to give access to data applications and the appropriate infrastructure. And so I'm setting the stage for Max to go in a little more deeper, and I'm going to give him control of the slides so he can take it from here. Take it away, Max.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So yeah, next we're going to talk about securing a hybrid environment, right? We're going to try to answer questions like, how do we keep your company safe in a remote environment? So before, let's kind of set the stage here in terms of security and what new normal means in a pandemic world, right? So first of all, you gotta look for scam and phishing attempts onto your organization. Right, you may have policies in place, capabilities in place to prevent this, but unfortunately they're still going to get through. Right, so there's a heavy emphasis on education here for your end users to understand that everything is a potential threat and be on the lookout for those types of emails. In terms of access, you have to use a multi-factor authentication. Right, on day one of your implementation of a cloud tenant, you must make sure that you enforce this for all users, right? So not just admin users as well. If you don't have conditional access licenses, right, you can use the per user MFA capability, right, which is going to come as part of your 365 subscription, but definitely something that you need to be enforcing. In terms of the applications that your users are leveraging, you need to do a review, right? What are they currently using? Are they using applications that are not sanctioned by your company, right? So you got to really understand whether or not they're violating any policies. But before you get there, you got to understand the requirements, document them, and then start enforcing policies towards those applications. And lastly, right, we're talking about hybrid environments, right? So users are going to be accessing data from anywhere. You should be looking into leveraging desktop application virtualization technologies from Azure and 365, for example. You may be on your journey to migrate to the cloud. You may still have legacy applications, right, on-prem that you cannot migrate for some reasons right now. So a good way, for example, to expose that data out of the organization in a secure way is to use something like application proxy, right, from Azure, which would let you still be able to get into those legacy apps from anywhere. So in the next few slides here, we're going to talk about a few different topics, right? We're going to talk about the employee life cycle in a hybrid environment. We're going to talk about your data, right? Specifically around information protection, information governance. We're going to talk about device management and what is your strategy around that. And we'll also touch base on the threat protection. If you want to go to the next one, please. So to start, let's talk about the employee life cycle here and how you onboard new employees into your infrastructure. So couple of our recent projects here had to do with financial services organization as well as a government contractor. So we were seeing some hybrid work pre-COVID, but of course it really accelerated once COVID started. We had those companies start onboarding users from anywhere in the country. Right? They would get hired over essentially virtual call. They would never show up in the office, and they would start working from their home location, for example. right? So we had to find ways to get that machine provisioned, shipped to the user, to the new employee, so they can get started and become productive as soon as possible. So, you know, everybody is going to have a different backend, right, in terms of AD, right? We still have a lot of customers using on-prem AD with the cloud, right? So more of a hybrid Azure AD join type of situation. We've got other customers that were able to migrate off of the on-prem AD, and they're going to be more in a cloud environment. So regardless of what you're going to be using in the backend, right, we had great success with Autopilot from Microsoft 365. So as you can see here on this on this diagram, right, we were looking at a specific scenario for Autopilot. So Autopilot's got a lot of different flavors. This particular approach is the white glove approach, where you have an OEM and a hardware distributor essentially preparing a machine for your new employee. They're adding that device ID directly into your tenant, right? So you sign some paperwork with the OEM, and they get access to that specific section of your tenant to populate new machines into your directory. And then you've got that machine that is shipped directly to the user. The user unboxes the device, enters credentials, and essentially everything gets deployed onto that machine, right? So it's kind of replacing the traditional imaging process that everybody used to use. In this case, you're going to log in and you're going to have applications and policies being pushed at login time, essentially. So it's very, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So back to the concept of what I was talking about earlier with creating a profile. Now we have a government contractor, and that government contractor needs specific applications, and you put them into a dynamic group with a set of policies that said, hey, when this person logs in with this device, we're going to assign them these applications, these roles within the environment. And then if they leave the organization, we can also turn that all back and revoke access to those applications through this dynamic groups. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of managing images and updating images all the time, right, you can create your profiles, like in Intune, for example, target specific roles, and it takes just a few minutes, right, to update that profile and push the right applications to the right audience. So it really makes IT life easier, right? They have way less to manage, especially if you're going to use like a white glove approach. And for the user, I mean, it's again very straightforward. Just unbox the device, start it up, and again start being productive pretty much right away.
And that's for consulting, that's time to bill, right? So you get someone started on a new project and you reduce that time for them sitting around waiting 3 days for a device. That costs money. So this is a great example. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so that's more of for the device side of things. In terms of the user onboarding, right, we've been using a lot of dynamic groups for our customers, right? We found that a lot of companies out there had more of a manual process to create a user, then sync that user to the cloud, then add that user to various groups. So a lot of manual steps here that really took a long time for IT to complete. And of course, there can be issues with a manual process like that. So we typically recommend starting with cleaning up your on-premises AD environment, right? You want to make sure that every attribute that's going to be leveraged for your provisioning process is up to date, right? Get that data cleaned up, export it to a CSV, you know, get in there, make sure everybody has got something populated. And once you get to that stage, right, you're going to be able to leverage those attributes for dynamic groups in Microsoft 365. So a pretty popular one is, for example, the dynamic teams membership, where you're going to be able to, again, to be driving, for example, a team based off of the on-prem AD attribute. A common one is the department, right? So a user gets hired by the finance department. The user gets that department attributes configured to finance in on-prem AD. And once everything is synced up to the cloud, we're going to have a team, a Microsoft team that's going to be picking up that attribute, and it's going to add that user automatically to the team. Vice versa, right? User is going to leave the organization, it's going to get pulled from those groups automatically. The downside of the typical manual approach here is usually we see a lot of, I would say, orphan records in 365. And again, that can cause a security risk. It's hard for IT to manage and see exactly what account is alive, what account is not in use. So it really helps, again, both the security side of it as well as the management side of it. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about offboarding here. We just, added for you guys a sample process that we've used with several of our customers, and we had great success with it. So don't know if you guys saw the new capability in Azure, fairly recent, called continuous access evaluation. So we recommend setting this up. It's kind of a one-time action for your team to do. And it allows for near real-time session revocation. So right now, without it, right, if you terminate a user, that user is still going to have access to 365 until the access token is being revoked. So it's still going to be alive until then. With that CAE capability, which is continuous access evaluation, it's going to be much quicker to terminate the token. So it's really going to enforce better security in your environment. So once you're done with that phase, you're going to be able to block the login. Usually, we like to convert those accounts to shared mailboxes, which would allow you to, of course, have multiple users like managers still access the data. Right, the mailbox will still be able to receive emails, which is great for some roles, right, and some users that still need to be essentially alive in your directory to receive email notifications and email traffic. You're going to be able to remove the license with shared mailbox, so you're not going to incur any costs for that departed user. And then you're going to be able also to wipe business mobile device using Intune, for example. And usually about 3 months or 6 months into it, we recommend converting that account to litigation hold. So keeping that mailbox into a hold, which is like a vault essentially, you're not paying for it as well. And it allows you to unsync the account on premises. So that's really when you can start cleaning up that old user from your directory. With a shared mailbox, you're still going to have that account in your tenant. But again, hopefully it kind of gives you an idea of best practices here for offboarding. Usually we see customers that have pretty solid onboarding processes, but they may not be as mature in terms of offboarding. So here you've got some things to potentially think about. Next topic here is going to be about accessing corporate data from home. All right. So of course, since the pandemic started, everybody is accessing tenant data from pretty much anywhere, using a lot of personal devices from home. So with one of our customers, another government contractor, we were mandated to start securing SharePoint data, OneDrive data, and Exchange data from personal devices. So how do you start such a project, right? So the first thing you need to do is you need to enroll devices into Intune, right? So you need to create essentially 2 categories, right? First category is going to be your managed devices. So that's going to be your corporate devices enrolled into Intune. And everything else is going to be what they call unmanaged devices. So that would be personal tablet, personal laptop, workstation from home, things like that. So once you have those 2 buckets, you're going to be able to target your corporate devices to have full access to your data, for example. However, you're going to be able to provide a limited access from those unmanaged devices, right? So typically, we still want to allow users to be productive from home using those personal devices, but we don't want to, have them download attachment from Exchange, or because once that data is physically onto the personal device, it's out of your organization. There's nothing you can do about it, right? It can get forwarded to anywhere, and anyway, you lose visibility. So again, like first step here is really gotta think about your device management strategy, and try to get those machines into Intune to deploy policies upon that. All right, next slide, please. So another topic we wanted to talk about is how do you prevent secure data from getting leaked out of the organization, right? So we found that there are several red flags that are getting triggered in 365 when an employee is potentially leaving the company. So usually what they start doing is, forwarding emails, corporate emails to personal accounts, or they start, doing a bulk download from OneDrive for business, for example. Some other times, you've got an attacker that got a hold of one of your Office 365 accounts. They're also going to set mail forwarding to a separate account to just start gathering some knowledge about your organization without doing anything else. So usually the information in 365 is there. It's more of a matter of, are you looking at it? Are you getting notified that something is going on? So we highly recommend, looking into mail forwarding rules, either blocking or monitoring, depending on your organization. In some cases, we do allow mail forwarding for specific users based on business requirements, and we block them for everybody else. And for the bulk download, you've got a list of alerts that are present in your compliance center that you can look into. And I don't know if some of you are using what they used to call MCAS, which is now called Defender for Cloud Apps, but it also has policies there where you can capture the bulk download from OneDrive. So a couple of things here to kind of think about here.
I would say that's a good idea for alerting HR. If someone starts downloading large amounts of project work, typically means they're looking to make a departure and taking all their work with them, right? Red flag.
Yep, definitely red flags there. So there's that side of it, right, where users trying to leave the company, but there's also just users sending, let's say, PII data, sensitive data like patent data from the organization to a competitor could be by mistake, right? So first of all, you need to understand what data, or first of all, what data is considered to be secure or sensitive in your organization, and you need to know where it is, how much of it you have. So you got to start thinking about data classification, right? Put that on paper and think about really what your structure looks like. Once you know what it looks like, you can start labeling content. So depending on, again, on your licensing level, you may only be able to do manual tagging. If you've got like more of a Azure Premium P2, for example, you're going to be able to do automated labeling and tagging. But the next step is going to be that tagging, which is going to be very important. I think a lot of you said you're using DLP policies right now, which is great, right? So because that's going to be your next step, right? You've got labeled content. You're going to set up policies to make sure that sensitive content, should be encrypted, for example, when it gets sent out of the organization, maybe should be just blocked.
Yeah. When you're, one thing I want to point out, it's not on the slide, but when you're in the process of creating these policies, you can deploy them in read-only view as a start. I think it's a good practice, right? Before you see changes in the environment, you can start seeing what impact this policy would have and measure the potential impact at the end user or department level.
Yeah, it's a good point, Chris, because actually we've had several customers that, set up DLPs fairly quickly, right? And then deployed that at the organization level and had some issues, right? Users were confused, everything was kind of getting blocked here and there. So when we do DLP deployments, we tend to kind of drag this over several weeks or several months at times, right? Starting with a pilot, growing that user population, doing a lot of education, what the labels mean, what are the changes that are going to happen when you select label A or label B. And again, everybody, making sure everybody's on the same page and understanding what those mean. So DLP is not a complicated process in terms of implementation. It's really more of an adoption challenge at times.
It's kind of like me with my kids, setting expectations. That's what I call parenting. Setting and managing expectations. Same thing here.
Still looking for the magic recipe there. And lastly, in terms of securing data from within the organization, there's something that came out probably a year and a half ago called Endpoint DLP, which is kind of a replacement of WIP, if you guys are familiar with that. So it's going to be setting up boundaries on the actual Windows 10 or Windows 11 workstation, and it's going to prevent users, for example, from going from like Office 365 Exchange Online to Gmail, right? So exchanging an attachment from like the corporate environment into like a personal environment. So it's going to set those boundaries. It's really more of a prevention of unintentional sharing, I want to say, rather than intentional sharing, but it's still a good technology to put in place, again, to minimize any potential mistakes from users there. Just wanted to also show you a couple of examples in terms of user experience, right? So we've got some labeling we talked about earlier, where you can easily, select a label, and each label is going to have specific action, such as encryption, do not forward, potentially just getting blocked and not being able to be sent out of the tenant, so internal only. In terms of DLP, we put in a screenshot here of Outlook on the web user experience. So as you can see here, we selected a specific document that's got credit card information. We're trying to send it to a user that is not part of the tenant, so we're getting some policy tips saying, hey, this is a sensitive information here. Your recipient is outside of the organization, right? So we may be blocking that data from getting out of the organization. So just some proactive reminders for your users here to understand what's going on again with the data they're working with. So kind of to wrap this up here in terms of responsibilities in the hybrid world, right? So for IT, IT's role here is really making sure, they can provide access to users access to applications in a secure way. So security should be at the top of the list. However, when we've seen companies just focus on security, and then you have to go over like 5 different steps to get to your data, and then it ends up being a big issue for users. So always keep in mind that at the end of the day, you're delivering applications for your end users, and you gotta make them as seamless as possible, right? Try to do single sign-on, for example. Try to make it again seamless so users can get to the applications quickly. In terms of staff, right? There's a ton of education that you need to do. They need to understand what they can be doing, where they can do it from, what device they can be using. You should also tell them that everything is suspicious. They should always challenge what they're seeing, what they're getting. A good example I have here is, a lot of people use Authenticator app for MFA, and sometimes they get that notification on the phone. They just click approve without even thinking that they never logged in to 365, right? So that was not them. And we've had a few instances where some of our customers got hacked because of that. Someone just went into the application, approved the request, but they had never logged in, and someone else got in. So always be suspicious here. Make sure your users understand that. And another, again, big assumptions typically is users think everything is handled by IT. Security is handled by IT. I've got nothing to do, but as we mentioned earlier, things are going to get through, right? There's a lot more attacks now. Attackers are always finding a different way to get in. So things are going to get through, and users need to be paying attention to this. Yeah, with that said, Chris, over to you.
Thanks. Let's see if I can get rid of this mouse pointer and take that control. There we go. Thanks. Those are really good insights, Max. And you did this every day with our clients, and it shows that you can speak from really great experience of having deployed and configured these for many of our clients. We appreciate your work. So what's next for the trend of hybrid work? We mentioned in the beginning VPN connections and virtual desktops. Well, virtual desktops continue to evolve. This is latest from Microsoft. It's called Windows 365. It's essentially a fully cloud experience delivered with the whole Microsoft 365 package from the cloud to any device anywhere. So they can bring their own device, and you can give them a desktop environment that's fully configured with their applications based upon policy that we talked about today. So essentially, you have a pool of Windows operating systems in the cloud, and you attach their profile, and it's much more cost effective than dedicating a device to a user. And now there's a caveat with anything virtual desktop. In my opinion, I think there are specific users that this is appropriate for. I don't think it's designed for the day-to-day worker who's a heavy knowledge worker who typically likes to have a rich device. But think of those profiles again, where you may have temporary staff or task-based staff. Maybe this summer you're going to do an internship program. You know, Windows 365 is a great way to not have to spend $2,000 on a notebook for someone coming in for a few months, or a contractor, or a task-based worker that you really want to fully control that experience and let them focus on the task at hand. Something to think of, reach out to us. So key takeaways again from this talk. Microsoft 365 is the cloud that we're betting on. It provides a great way to securely provide staff with the tools that they need. But IT needs policies. So talk to your business ownership. If you don't feel there's enough policies around there, it's really hard to move forward and make these customization and configurations without the business driving, you know, the controls that need to be in place. Once we have those controls, that we can get quite granular, as you probably just saw, and really detail with how we can control access and control information as it flows across your cloud and user devices. Expect that this is going to change and continue to shift. Same thing with our staff expectations. It's been interesting in the last couple of years that we've turned these capabilities on, but they continue to evolve and creating new opportunities for us to do better work. So thanks for your attention. Are there questions, Sasha?
No, we actually don't have much. So you guys did a great job. But if anybody comes up with a question after maybe reviewing the deck, we're here. So feel free to send those in.
So great. So next steps and recommendations, I'll give a quick pitch. Max and I have been delivering a lot of these sensitive data workshops. The content comes from Microsoft, and in some cases, some of our clients get funding from Microsoft for us to deliver this. But that being said, there's a lot of good information in these workshops. The one that we like right now is basically the compliance workshop, now called Sensitive Data, allows us to discover dark data. So on the right-hand side, I snippet from what this 3-week workshop will deliver for you. We assess the organization's dark data with a data risk check, which is essentially getting a baseline of your environment and running a series of configurations in the compliance center to look at data. And if you've been running the cloud for 2-3 years, you might not realize how much data you have, and maybe it's time to take a look at different ways to archive or control or set up retention policies around this data. Or you also may not know how sensitive information is persistent across different experiences in the Microsoft cloud. So we can help you reduce that risk and make some recommendations and next steps. So that's a good way to get a hold of us as a follow-up to this workshop. Any other ways, Sasha?
Yeah, and so obviously the workshop's great. Subscribe to us if you don't already. We'll send out the recording, as I mentioned. We do have one last quick poll, just so we don't bug you if you don't want to bug, but if you're interested in the workshop or just even learning more, we have a great overview on it. Let us know here, and we will provide you the information if you wish to have it. And really, other than that, guys, I think that's great. I think that's everything.
Well, this was fun. Thank you, Max, Sasha, and thank you, Max, again for your expertise. It was delightful talking to our clients about something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Everyone have a great holiday.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care.